When the power grid fails or the refrigerator breaks down, the average household loses everything in their freezer within 48 hours, which means hundreds of dollars of food turning into waste while your family goes hungry. But there's a collection of 9 ancestral preservation methods that have kept food safe for thousands of years without a single watt of electricity. The problem isn't that fresh food spoils. It's that we've forgotten how our ancestors stored entire harvests through brutal winters and scorching summers, using nothing but salt, sun, and strategy. Here's how to preserve your entire harvest without electricity, using the 9-method survival plan that have documented from generations of self-sufficient living. The fundamental reality that modern society has forgotten is that refrigeration is barely a century old, which means that for 99% of human history, people preserved massive quantities of food without any technology. And they did it so effectively that communities survived year-round on food harvested in just a few months. Every winter storm that knocks out power reminds us of the same truth. Refrigeration is the weakest link in modern food security. A single point of failure that can collapse in hours and leave families helpless. His preservation system isn't about preparing for disaster. It's about reclaiming independence from a fragile infrastructure that can fail at any moment. And once you master these 9 methods, you'll never panic when the power goes out, because your food security doesn't depend on electricity. Method 1 is salting, which is the oldest preservation technique in human history and works by drawing moisture out of food through osmosis, creating an environment where bacteria cannot survive. Imagine a wooden crate packed with layers of coarse salt and deep red cuts of meat, each piece separated by white crystals that slowly pull moisture and transform flesh into something that will last through winter without spoiling. Salt preservation works for meat, fish, and some vegetables, and the process is absurdly simple, but requires understanding the ratio of salt to food and the curing time needed for different products. For meat, you need coarse salt covering every surface in a ratio of roughly 3 pounds of salt per 20 pounds of meat. Layer it in a wooden box with salt between each layer. Store in a cool, dark place for several weeks. Then brush off excess salt and hang it where it will keep for months. Fish preservation works faster because fish flesh is more delicate. So you gut and clean the fish, pack them in salt, and they're ready in days rather than weeks. The same method that sustains sailors crossing oceans for centuries. Method 2 is drying or dehydration, which removes moisture that bacteria and mold need to grow. And it works for fruits, vegetables, herbs, meat, and fish. Picture rows of apple slices laid out on screens in the sun, slowly transforming from crisp white flesh to leathery golden rings that will keep for years. Or bundles of herbs hanging upside down from rafters, filling the air with fragrance as they dry. The sun is the original dehydrator and still works perfectly if you have consistent sunny weather. But you can also use ambient air in a dry climate, or build simple drying racks near a heat stove like a wood stove. For fruits and vegetables, slice them thin, spread on screens in direct sunlight or warm, dry areas, and most items dry in 2 to 5 days until leathery with no visible moisture. Herbs are easiest because you simply bumble and hang them upside down in a warm place, and in a week or 2, they're ready to store. Meat becomes jerky by slicing thin, seasoning with salt and spices, and drying slowly until completely dehydrated and shelf-stable for months. Method 3 is fermenting, which uses beneficial bacteria to preserve food while actually increasing its nutritional value and creating probiotics that support gut health. Imagine a row of glass jars lined up on a pantry shelf, each one filled with shredded cabbage, slowly bubbling and transforming as beneficial bacteria work their ancient magic, turning fresh vegetables into tangy, preserved food that's actually healthier than what you started with. Fermentation works for vegetables, dairy, and beverages. And the process is controlled decomposition, where beneficial bacteria outcompete harmful bacteria and create an acidic environment that prevents spoilage. The simplest fermentation is sauerkraut, where you shred cabbage, massage it with salt until it releases liquid, pack it tightly into a jar, and let it sit at room temperature for several weeks while beneficial bacteria convert sugars into lactic acid. Pickles work the same way using cucumbers, and you can ferment almost any vegetable using the same salt brine method, creating preserved food that keeps for months and is packed with beneficial bacteria. Method 4 is root cellaring, which uses the Earth's natural temperature stability to store root vegetables, winter squash, apples, and other hardy crops for months without any process. Picture a cool underground room where wooden crates overflow with potatoes nestled in sawdust, where apples rest on slatted shelves, where the air is heavy with the smell of earth and moisture, and where winter squash line the walls like golden sentinels guarding your food security through the coldest months. A root cellar is simply a cool, dark space with high humidity and good ventilation. And it can be as simple as a corner of your basement, or as elaborate as an underground room built into a hillside. The ideal conditions are temperatures between 32 and 40 degrees, with humidity around 90%. And different crops have different requirements. Root vegetables store best in damp sand or sawdust, while winter squash needs drier conditions on shelves with good air circulation. Apples store for months, but give off ethylene gas that spoils other produce, so store them separately. Onions and garlic need curing first by drying until papery. Then they can be braided and hung where they'll keep for 6 to 8 months. Method 5 is canning, which involves heating food in sealed jars to kill bacteria and create a vacuum seal that prevents recontamination. Imagine rows of gleaming jars filled with ruby red tomato sauce, golden peaches suspended in syrup, deep green beans standing at attention, each one sealed and shelf-stable for years without refrigeration. While canning requires some equipment like jars, lids, and a large pot for water bath canning, or a pressure canner for low-acid foods, it doesn't require electricity and produces shelf-stable food that lasts for years. Water bath canning works for high-acid foods like tomatoes, fruits, and jams, where you pack food into sterilized jars, seal with lids, and process in boiling water for a specified time. The heat kills bacteria and creates a vacuum seal that prevents spoilage. Pressure canning is required for low-acid foods like vegetables and meat because they need higher temperatures to kill dangerous bacteria. And a pressure canner uses steam under pressure to reach temperatures above 240 degrees. Method 6 is making preserves, jams, and jellies, which uses high sugar content to preserve fruit by creating an environment where bacteria cannot grow. The basic process involves cooking fruit with sugar in equal proportions until it reaches the gel point, where pectin causes it to thicken, then packing into sterilized jars. Properly made preserves keep for years without refrigeration and turns surplus fruit into concentrated sweetness. Method 7 is making wine, cider, and mead, which preserves fruit through fermentation, where yeast converts sugars into alcohol, and the alcohol content prevents spoilage while creating beverages that were safer to drink than water in many historical contexts. The process involves crushing fruit to release juice, adding yeast, and allowing fermentation in a container with an airlock that lets carbon dioxide escape while preventing contaminants from entering. After several weeks to months, you have a shelf-stable alcoholic beverage that improves with age and preserves the harvest in liquid form. Method 8 is smoking, which combines drying with the antimicrobial effects of smoke compounds to preserve meat and fish while adding incredible flavor. Picture strips of venison or gammon hanging in a small wooden smokehouse, surrounded by fragrant hardwood smoke that slowly penetrates and transforms the flesh into something that will keep for months. Cold smoking happens below 90 degrees and preserves through smoke exposure over many hours, while hot smoking uses higher temperatures that cook the food while smoking it. Both methods require a smokehouse and hardwood smoke, producing meat or fish that keeps for weeks or months. Method 9 is freezing, which includes because even without electric freezers, winter provides natural freezing temperatures in cold climates. And understanding how to use winter cold for preservation is part of the self-sufficient system. In regions with sustained freezing temperatures, you can store meat, vegetables, and prepared foods outside in insulated boxes or unheated sheds, where they'll stay frozen solid for months. The key being protection from temperature fluctuations and animals with secure containers in locations that stay consistently below freezing. Here's what this means in practice. Instead of losing your entire harvest when the power fails, you have 9 different strategies for preserving every type of food you grow. Your tomatoes become canned sauce and dried slices. Your cabbage becomes sauerkraut. Your apples go into the root cellar and become cider. Your meat gets salted and smoked. Your herbs dry on racks, your berries become jam, and nothing is wasted. You're not dependent on a fragile electrical grid or expensive freezers that can fail. You're using methods that have sustained human civilization for thousands of years. And you're creating a food security system that's actually more resilient than modern refrigeration because it has no single point of failure. The 9-method system isn't about going backward. It's about reclaiming knowledge that made our ancestors independent and resilient. And once you master these techniques, you'll see your harvest differently. Because every vegetable and fruit isn't something that will spoil in days. It's something you can preserve for months or years, using nothing but basic materials and ancestral wisdom. So start today by choosing one method that matches your harvest. Whether that's drying herbs, fermenting cabbage into sauerkraut, or storing root vegetables in a cool basement corner. Master that method, then add another. And within a season or two, you'll have the skills to preserve your entire harvest, without electricity, without expensive equipment, and without depending on a system that can fail when you need it most. Preservation isn't about nostalgia, it's about sovereignty. The moment you learn these 9 methods, electricity stops being a threat, and your harvest becomes freedom.